to see where I've been. I would like very much to show you where I am going. What are you doing? It's not time for you to leave.
It got me. I felt it everywhere.
But in the end, you are weak and fragile, just like him. Like all the rest of them. And you will break.
Ever since the ending of Season 4 of Stranger Things, I've been seeing a lot of debate online and whether or not more characters should be killed off. For years, this has been a consistent topic on the show, and while there are valid points on each side, in today's video, I want to specifically break down why, in my opinion, the narrative requires some characters go before the series officially wraps up. And I'm actually pretty surprised with how many people don't seem to be on board with the idea. Essentially, a big argument or claim is that this show isn't Game of Thrones, a show which was very popular for killing off its main characters in sometimes just purely shocking ways, no matter where the character was at in their own personal narrative arc. And while I agree with part of this, the main cast should not be killed off for shock unless it really adds up, I don't think that disqualifies the idea of any characters dying at all. But some would like to stand by the fact that this just isn't that type of show. Why I think some feel that way is they walk away from Stranger Things feeling like it's sort of a Goonies ripoff, a very nostalgic series that can be a very fun and quirky adventure with some tense situations. But I would personally argue that this series has always harbored some horror elements within its series. To look at all the imagery and aesthetics that we've seen throughout the show, let alone the actual horrific scenarios some characters catch themselves in, it's strange people would still think this series is exactly like the movie of the Goonies. Some evidence to validate this would be just the opening minutes of the series altogether. In every show, the very opening moments are pivotal to how the rest of the story will actually play out or what themes it will try to capture. I doubt there's a series out there that starts with one genre in the opening minutes and for the rest of the series in its entirety is a completely different genre. No, Stranger Things opening minutes starts with the scientist fleeing for his life and failing to get away. And while it does cut to some lighthearted D&D nature in introducing the core characters that we see, the tone quickly shifts back when Will Byers is taken for the first time. All that be it to say, the series has constantly juggled different tonal shifts. But take those first few minutes of the scientists and watch them by itself, and you would assume this was a straight up horror. But to specifically touch on those opening minutes itself, there's a lot of lab outbreak scenes in media, but this one specifically was tonally dark. For comparison, let's check out the scene from the new Jurassic Park movie. Like Stranger Things, this opens up with a group of scientists within a lab when an outbreak occurs. But just notice the differences between these two scenes. Sure, there are some creepier elements for the Jurassic World movie, but everything's super saturated, bright and colorful. You can see everything that's going on. Juxtapose this with the Stranger Things opening, and you'll see what I mean. And the series would continue for the rest of its run, shifting between a light and happy tone with a dark and more serious and scary one. But that's just speaking of the aesthetics in the series. Let's look at the many horrific things that happen to different people throughout its run. Many people within the show have gotten shot and killed, have gotten mauled and killed by a demogorgon, have gone through horrific possessions and exorcisms, and have even been absorbed into a grotesque meat monster. While others can get randomly mind invaded and confronted with your deepest insecurities and fears until all of your limbs snap apart and your eyes get sucked to the back of your head. Point is, people have died in a lot of very strange ways throughout this series, and many of them unjustly so, being an innocent bystander and maybe even far away from most of the action going on. Some simply caught up in the wrong place at the wrong time, or even targeted despite their lack of connection to the things at play. Point is, when you introduce such deadly, random, and high-stake risks, you're obligated to have that threat remain consistent until it's finally dealt with. By that I mean, there's no narrative logical reason why some of the main cast haven't suffered the same consequences as the many red shirts throughout the series. Red shirts are a term for characters that aren't necessarily main ones and are easier to kill off to show the stakes. And this series does really well with its character development, but it still shows a red shirt in almost every season. And I'm not talking the super side characters or the extras or even the bad guys. I'm talking about the lovable characters that we lose, that we tend to forget were introduced that very season. I'm talking Bob, I'm talking Billy and the Russian guy, I'm talking Eddie. It's very obvious obvious with a lot of these characters, considering how their story ends, that they were specifically introduced just to be killed off. And yes, their characters are given some quality development, and that's why we grow so attached, but this does help make the main characters feel like they're in danger, despite the fact that they're really not. Heck, even in season 1, their original plan was to eventually kill off Steve Harrington. Eventually, they decided not to, so he broke the curve for that one, but I'll touch more on his character later when I get into my death predictions. Again, some say no characters in this show need to die for shock value, but characters already have, like Bob. The only difference in the shock value for a character like Bob versus Game of Thrones character like Robb Stark would be that Robb has been there the whole time. Imagine if Bob still suffered the same fate and still went through everything he went through in season 2, but he had been a character since season 1. This would have made him feel less like a guest star within the season. And while there definitely are some plot elements that the Duffers are tying back to and continuing forward with towards the end of the series, it's very apparent that the story sort of is developed as each season goes on. And that's fine, not every story has to be fully thought out or stick to plans from its very inception, but my point being, killing off so many characters in dangerous ways, and killing off so many likable characters in dangerous ways, but keeping the main cast totally fine, will tend to make the cast come off as sort of superheroes. And throughout the story, you don't want your narrative to reveal your characters are coated with plot armor. For example, The Walking Dead. In the earlier seasons of the show, it felt like almost any character could get killed off at any time, but by the time you reach the end of the series, most of these characters were superheroes who would face situations that should get them killed 9 times out of 10, which is very resembling of Stranger Things. Again, I mentioned earlier that some characters are totally innocent bystanders that have nothing to do with any of the main cast, yet they still get completely decimated by someone like Vecna or the Mind Flayer. But then you have our main characters who are actively and constantly stepping into very high risk and dangerous situations. Yet the worst thing that's happened to any of them long term has been what happened to Max, who was also a character that was introduced in season 2, and still suffered a better fate than any of the other red shirts that encountered Vecna in the same way. With this series, the only person we should feel is absolutely safe until maybe the series close should be characters like Eleven and maybe even Will. Otherwise, until season 4 came around, I never really felt nervous for any of these characters' safety. But you could still have a character get caught in one of these same deadly scenarios and develop an elaborate means for their escape. For example, Max. Her escaping Vecna made complete sense within the story's narrative, so her not exactly suffering the same fate as the rest is forgivable. But that all could change considering it's the show's final season. See, when a series is as popular as Stranger Things and you don't really know how long it's going to keep going, studios will want to keep their core cast around for as long as possible. And while some series will slowly lose their cast because they push the series to go on for far too long, looking at you, Supernatural or The Walking Dead, Stranger Things thankfully is wrapping up everything within 5 seasons total. It looks like within this season, we're gonna get monsters from the Upside Down invading most of Hawkins. My nightmare scenario is a Demogorgon rampaging through multiple soldiers quickly and efficiently, but then stopping when it gets close to Mike, Joyce, or Will, and maybe taking its time walking a little slower. But for all these reasons, this is exactly why Stranger Things is due to kill off a couple of characters before it's officially done. With the threats developed and the risks at play, and with this being the final season, now is a perfect time for the Duffers to remove that plot armor. And while there are some characters who could definitely be taken down before the end of the season, some are likely very safe. But thanks to all the new trailers and some of the interviews, I think I got a solid idea on some death predictions for where we'll actually go by the end of the series. Let's start with the parents. Joyce, I believe, is a 50-50. She could definitely die trying to protect Will, or she could survive and try to be a character that brings Will back to the light when he is possessed by Vecna or the Mind Flayer. Then we have Hopper. He's also a 50-50 for me. Narratively, his character has served his purpose, but I feel if he lives, Joyce should definitely be there with him. Otherwise, it'd be kind of a bummer to have the guy survive and still be alone after all this time. Then we have Miss Wheeler. Yeah, I do not think Karen's gonna make it this season, which is really unfortunate because she had the opportunity to sort of go and live a more exciting life, but chose to stay and take care of the ones she loved, which could potentially be the decision that leads to her inevitable death. I'm thinking Vecna at some point will take Holly and in the process severely wound Karen. She'll likely get transferred to a hospital, and there we'll likely see her go, and it's even possible we'll see all the characters together at the hospital get attacked yet again by some more demos. But where does that leave Mr. Wheeler? Mr. Wheeler is also a 50-50 for me. With the potential passing of his wife, I could see his character finally getting up off the couch and getting a little more active. And while he could maybe pursue revenge and eventually die trying to do so, it's also very possible he could grow as a person and live on after all the events of season 5. Then let's go to Lucas's parents. I think they're probably safe. They haven't really been developed enough to be too heartbreaking if they died, and I feel Lucas is already pretty focused on Max this season. So Lucas's parents are likely fine, Max's mom likely depressed, Dustin's mom will likely be devoured by cats, but what about everyone's favorite mother, Steve? Well, I actually think Steve will make it. My money's on his survival simply because his character's already broken all the rules of the narrative. Introduced in the first season from Jonathan's point of view as an asshole and a bully, but from an outside perspective, a relatively normal dude who has consistently survived crazier and crazier situations every time. Grown to become a mentor figure and even a mother, I think at this point killing him off would be a huge disservice to not only his character, but also to Dustin and Eddie's. As for Dustin to lose 2 mentors would really just be a middle finger to his face. No, my money's on Steve being safe. But what about Nancy? Well, she could also end up having a happy ending and maybe even forming a strong, happy marriage with Jonathan. I don't think she'll end up with Steve, but I could also see her dying trying to take down Vecna or even dying with Jonathan. I have this weird idea that both her and Jonathan will get trapped in the Upside Down at some point, but either way, Jonathan I don't think is a character likely to survive the rest of the series. His character is a little bit confusing for me. I'm not really quite sure where they're going with his narrative arc, outside of potentially taking more responsibility and sacrificing himself so that Nancy could escape or have a better future. But yeah, Jonathan's always been an enigma for me. Season 1, he was a bit of a creeper. Season 2, he was a bit aggressive. Season 3 and 4, he lied a little bit. And Season 4 specifically, he seemed to become directionless, looking for a purpose. All in all, I just can't see where he'd go if he did survive, should Nancy not be there with him. But let's move on to Robin. Robin is likely to live, though I could definitely see her dying this season in a very badass yet shocking way, potentially protecting the love of her life or even her friends. Her going would definitely be a surprise, but would only really go down if she went out like a badass. Murray, on the other hand, should be done for. The only way I could really see him surviving would be maybe living on to become a sort of radio host for Hawkins. But otherwise, yeah, he's definitely done for. But let's get into our main cast of 30-year-old kids here. We have Lucas, who I honestly think is safe despite how cooked he appears in these trailers. But dude's G, and I just don't see his character arc ending with him dying. Mike, also safe. I personally would prefer if out of any of the core kids he was killed off, despite me liking Finn Wolfhard and all, but Mike as a character just really bothers me almost every season, though I could see him being a lot more mature and tolerable in season 5. Either way, the reason I think he's gonna be alive is because the series will likely end with him either playing a D&D game with some of the old crew, or hosting a D&D game for a new generation of kids. Max. I do think Max is safe. I believe she is currently trapped in a Vecna mind prison, potentially taking place within the 50s. And while there could be a moment where they have to let go of all of the victims within Vecna's mind place, for their bodies are no longer functioning in the real world, and Max may decide to stay, I'm personally rooting for Max to return to her body and reunite with Lucas. Though her limbs were broken and could have healed, I wonder if her eyes are gonna be okay. I don't know, I just want Max to be happy. But let's go ahead and hit Dustin. Dustin is a 50-50 for me. His character definitely seems to represent the sort of growing up aspect of this coming of age story. So a part of me could see him officially going off to college and developing some new stories, maybe even returning as an adult down the line for a future Stranger Things spinoff. There is one factor putting him at risk, and that's Eddie's death. See, we know it's likely him and Steve are gonna partner up again this season, and should Steve reach a situation where his life is at risk, I could definitely see Dustin sacrificing himself to prevent a repeat of what happened to Eddie happening again. But let's go ahead and get into Will. Will is personally my favorite character ever since the very first episode of the series, and while ever since season 2 the series has pretty much forgotten about him entirely, giving him the weakest story arcs for season 3 and season 4, I do think that our boy Will is likely to not make it through this season. This to me will be the one death in the series that feels the most unjust and most undeserving, but will be the most easy to swallow because before he goes, he will likely be possessed by the Mind Flayer again. See, my theory for Will is that Vecna will find him, transfer themselves from Henry, who's become a decrepit, dead carcass of a body, and officially taking over Will. This could lead to Will becoming the villain for the final few parts of the season, and eventually facing off with 11. I could see Will wreaking havoc, and then either his mom or Mike getting close to him and trying to get him to remember who he is, and then him potentially sacrificing himself to stop the villain that he's become. And while I really hope the story avoids this route, and finally gives Will a bit of a break, his character could really go either way. But what about 11? Arguably the main character of the entire series. I believe 11, whether she lives or dies, will definitely be separated from the rest of her friends. This would just fall in line with the themes of nostalgia the series is trying to capture for this time period, but all these group of kids who lived relatively normal lives encounter a new magical and superpowered friend. They go on some adventures with this friend, get mixed up in some crazy situations, and usually by the end of the story, they end up saying goodbye to this new friend they made and shifting back to the regular world. Meaning 11 either could die trying to stop the Mind Flayer or even Will, or like in the beginning of the series at the end of season 1, she could have one huge final demonstration of her abilities before completely disappearing, this time completely without a trace. This would also be a bit poetic considering the series wants to make us believe that 11's the reason the Upside Down exists in the first place. Personally, I think that responsibility falls to Dr. Brenner and his evil actions. But what do you guys think? Should any characters even die this season? And if so, who do you think's making it and who do you think won't? Either way, if you enjoyed the video, helps me out a lot if you like or comment. Thank you Mud members for your continued patronage, and get prepared to say goodbye to a story that's been going on for almost 10 years.